To us as feminists, the first thing that we want is for the world to act to end the crisis. Because if you're not cutting emissions, if you are not managing the crisis, like we cannot have inclusion when the world doesn't exist.
Dear friends, welcome to Azerbaijan. Welcome to COP29. The COP29 presidency's top priority is to agree a fair and ambitious new collective quantified goal on climate finance. Current policies are leading us to 3 degrees of warming. These temperatures would be catastrophic for billions. We still have much to do and just 12 days to land a deal.
So if you're not going to any of these negotiation rooms, or even if you are going to the negotiation rooms, this is the moment when all of our voices are very important and we need to be heard loudly in these halls, right?
Climate crisis, the economic crisis are not gender neutral, are non-neutral across the different intersections that defines our realities. Women, gender, non-conforming people, LGBTQI+ people, we do need a space where we come together and can speak about it.
Cici, thank you so much for joining our caucus, joining our session.
The Women and Gender Constituency is one of the 9 official observer groups that represent different communities, organizations from all around the world, from civil society.
This is the party-led process. That means that it's only government that they are allowed to making decisions. But all of us are coming here to observe those discussions and potentially being able to influence those decisions as part of our advocacy work.
Hi everybody, so the long-awaited first new iteration of the NCQT text dropped this morning. Skimming really quickly through, there are in the context a couple of the paragraphs that we absolutely have to fight for, because this is the only one that explicitly mentions human rights in any shape or form.
For over a decade, we've come into these spaces, we've read every document, we've looked at every piece of text and language to see where there are entry points to both enhance the progress of what's coming out of this so that they are taking gender equality, women's human rights into account, and that fundamentally they're not doing further harm by coming up with solutions that will exacerbate existing inequalities.
Distinguished delegates, welcome to the joint plenary to hear statements from the group of parties and observers.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Firstly, success at COP29 hinges on setting an ambitious, transparent, and time-bound finance goal.
We reiterate the responsibility of developed countries according to Article 9 to provide financial support to the developing countries.
We must not leave Baku without a new and strengthened world program on gender and the Gender Action Plan, and without adopting the decision on the review of the local communities and indigenous peoples platform.
We start this COP with deep concern over the lack of political leadership and ambition from all the parties, especially regarding the enhanced Lima work program and its gender action plan. After years of effort, progress remained painfully limited. In this challenging moment, we call for the presidency and the parties to place gender justice at the forefront of their agenda and regard it as a fundamental commitment towards a transformational climate action and ambition. We cannot afford to see gender equality treated as a peripheral issue, nor accept backtracking the progress we have achieved over the last decade.
Thank you.
Can I sit on the
This is really hard work to be engaged in. We're seeing an onslaught of fights against women's rights, the rights of Indigenous peoples, and it can be really hard to stay motivated and to stay hopeful that the just vision and the just future that we all have in mind is possible.
All right, everybody, good morning and welcome again. Thank you so much for being here today on this dialogue that we're going to have in this beautiful space. To get us kicked off, Mary, I would love to turn to you and say, why does this work matter to you, and what is giving you hope?
Well, thank you very much, and I am thrilled to be here. You know, this COP is about finance, but actually it's also a gender COP, because gender and finance are so intimately linked. And that is a message that we actually have to get across. And I think we have to make the economic case that a gender-responsive climate policy will move everything faster, because it's women who are working on climate issues on the ground. It's women at grassroots level, it's Indigenous women, it's women's networks working together who are making the difference.
Blocking women is blocking progress. And that has been demonstrated through and through business, civil society, conservation, and indeed climate action.
How do we both make a commitment to mobilize at minimum at least 100 million in additional financing directly to grassroots organizations working at the intersections of gender and climate? How do we better map this ecosystem of existing financial channels to be able to get money where it needs to go? A lot of that is through existing women's funds, women's organizations, and I think there's a lot of potential power in how we can move money now.
To Lydia and to the UAE Pavilion for hosting us in this beautiful space, and everyone.
You know, we're up against a lot, and it will only get harder next year. It's tough, but we're tough too. We're tough.
A lot of people back home are frustrated and saddened by the climate crisis, and I feel like even if I can do a tiny bit here, yeah, it gives me a bit of peace of mind.
Good morning, everybody. We often see that the issues of climate change, biodiversity loss, and desertification are treated in silos. We're here to break those silos today in interactive formats.
I think we come to COP because we want to see transformative change.
Thank you all for this discussion. So my big reflection was that women are disproportionately affected by the climate change. So it's important to us to start adding gender equity in the governmental plans and start to make solution of that.
We want to demand funding to women so that they can do a lot on biodiversity, because our biodiversity is our lifeblood.
So more and more power to the local communities, local knowledge, and the women who are at the heart of these solutions that we're seeing everywhere. Thank you so much.
Excellencies, you have before you the draft text. Now the floor is open to hear your reflections.
President, the critical objective of this COP is right now an empty placeholder. There is not a clear quantum defined by donors. So we are negotiating on nothing.
On gender, it is imperative that COP29 extends the mandate of Lima Work Programme on Gender for 10 years. We acknowledge that the text circulated this morning is not backsliding on previously agreed language.
At this stage, we must recognize that a perfect solution is unattainable. Failure to conclude this process would send a profoundly negative signal to the global community.
Yeah?
Right now, we're huddling up basically with the gender working group of the Women and Gender constituency and just kind of talking over the day, what's happened, what's not happened. So at the moment, we're basically just waiting for a new text to drop.
Climate finance negotiations at COP29 remain deadlocked. Countries are focused on fixing a new finance target to help poorer countries cope with the cost of climate action. But delegates have found it difficult to make progress.
We have been very active in the negotiations room for the past 2 weeks. And I want to point that out, an inherent dissonance in what is happening in those rooms and the values that developed countries are proclaiming, the values needed to sustain people in the planet because the funds do exist. We continue to see that developed country parties prefer to use those funds to further militarization, extractive capitalism, and patriarchy, the same root causes of the climate crisis. We continue to hear that the level of investment needed to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement is somehow difficult, as if there were competing priorities with the rights, health, lives, and livelihoods of people in the global south.
I must start by saying that this is the worst COP in recent memory. The way this COP is going, developing countries are actually being forced and are held hostage to accept a deal that isn't going to add up to get the job done to help put the world on a safe pathway.
To make things even more complicated, a group of fossil fuel-rich countries led by Saudi Arabia is trying to roll back on the promise the world made last year in Dubai to transition away from fossil fuels.
Enough with the lies! We see through you!
Trillions, not billions! Trillions, not billions! Trillions, not billions! Trillions!
Funded to harming agribusiness.
We are quite worried, to say the least, and are quite angry and upset at the current state of the negotiations.
Okay, let's huddle, team. They just dropped a text, and we were expecting like trillions, and they just said it was like 250 billion. It's a lot less significant than we were expecting. And basically like that undermines the whole process. If there's no finance, then there's no work programs. Because without finance, you can't really execute anything.
Well, we just ended our little huddle with the gender working group again, trying to look at the final text that we just received, and then also working on a statement to go live once, hopefully, it's adopted in plenary. I feel like it's not what we had hoped to see. The text definitely lacks ambition. And for us, that's sort of the complete bottom line. That's not why we come here, right? We come here to further our rights, not to maintain them or to regress on rights that already were established.
We are faced with one of the biggest challenges of all times, which will determine our existence. I regret to say that this document is nothing more than an optical illusion. This, in our opinion, will not address the enormity of the challenge we all face. Therefore, we oppose the adoption of this document, and please take note and regard of what we have just said from the floor of this room.
I appreciate the effort that has been made to ensure that we get to where we are, but I do lend my voice to India. And it's going to be a huge disservice to myself, my country, and the women, the rural women, the women who are in the developing countries. Not just the women, everybody.
Thank you for your statement.